How do we ensure that girls and women are not discriminated against on the basis of their gender in the family, school, workplace, and community?
Yeah, thank you, Your Excellency. But before I will answer for that question, I would like to give some comments for previous questions about property rights and decent work. So, of course, I fully agree with Ms. Kabir that there is no doubt that access to land and control over land is critical for empowerment, for women's economic empowerment. But we have to also to see that one of the greatest threats to women's land rights is land grabbing. We can't aim for equality only for the tiny minority of land that is left for marginalized communities living in poverty. And we must measure the amount of land that is accessible to communities, the amount of land that's being grabbed by corporations and governments, as well as the amount of land over which women have power to decision making. Talking about unpaid work and labor markets, we should consider reality. I mean, we can't aim to increase women's workplace participation if those jobs are jobs that are poorly paid or that expose women to exploitation. And of course, I just want to underline that women want employment opportunities, but we want decent opportunities that provide sustainable livelihoods and foster our potential. And in this process, we need very clear targets and indicators that measure the rights of domestic workers. I want to highlight domestic workers as domestic work is #1 reason for women's migration in Asia, in our region. Rights of domestic workers as simple indicator around the existence of domestic workers in labor courts with all legislative rights of others. And most importantly, we need to enforce a living wage. In Asia, we have the biggest gender pay gap, partly because growth has been dependent on women's low-paid labor. And if there is one message I want to highlight here, it is that we must agree to a global living wage indicator in post-2015 development agenda to measure and enforce living wages. So, and to the question about ensuring non-discrimination against girls and women at local levels, I want to highlight 3 important activities. First is the importance of feminist movement. And second is the need for capacity building and empowerment at local levels. And third is the women's role in decision making. Single biggest factor in advancing policies for women's rights is the existence of autonomous feminist movements. And researchers have confirmed how critical feminist movements are. And one of the good examples is women's movement in Kyrgyzstan that has strong networking due to which it was possible to enforce criminal court article for bride kidnapping, which mainly means early and forced marriages for women. Advocacy for change was based on participatory research results conducted by grassroots organizations, including my organization, and it was successful as sanctions for bride kidnapping were changed from 1 year up to 7 years. And secondly, in order to keep and sustain such achievements, we need local level activities aimed at empowering and strengthening the capacity of women and girls to address gender inequities, alongside efforts to integrate needs and interests of women and girls into the development process. And thirdly, I want to underline that Kyrgyzstan is one of only 2 countries in Asia that had a woman head of state and who has not come from family dynasty. When women leaders are seen as representing the elite, it doesn't make a real sense for women on the ground. It's very clear that we have to mandate targets for women in decision-making, and in my experience, it's most critical at the local level. If women become local leaders, it's more likely to change perceptions. And while there is a lot of attention on engaging men in changing norms, our first step should be to ensure women see themselves as right holders. And again, local women's movements are imperatives for that. So, and in conclusion, I'd like to stress that the bottom line to ensure non-discrimination of women and girls is that governments must take political will to address both the obvious laws and policies, but also to dismantle the systems that produce inequality, cultural systems, economical systems, and political systems, and to commit to development justice. We need a model that asserts the right to development for all people, and that ensures social and economic justice between men and women, between rich and poor. And finally, it will give us an opportunity to do something more than rhetoric, to really commit politically with resources. Thank you.